Welcome to the Field of Greens podcast presented by Northwoods Whitetails Food Plot Seed Company. Welcome to our YouTube audience. We're doing a 2-for-1 today. And today we're talking about switchgrass, pretty important topic. And first of all, Happy New Year to everybody. It's January 2nd when we're doing this. And you got to bear with me if I cough or stutter a little bit. I'm just getting over pneumonia. We're really backed up with questions and emails and everything, and we wanted to get this out today because it's so important. So one of the things we notice here at Northwoods is right after Thanksgiving, we get a ton of questions. Folks looking forward to 2025, maybe struggling with their hunting in 2024, and that's kind of like up to the minute information. You know, they're sitting in their stands. We literally get texts and messages from folks in their deer stands. You know, hey, I'm sitting here, I'm not seeing deer. I like this. I want to do that. What do you think? You know, they'll send us some pictures or whatever their properties, and we're not really doing habitat plans, so to speak. We're just helping them with their food plots, maybe giving them some pointers on layouts and stuff. But a lot of the people are asking right now about switchgrass. So what I did is I went back all the way to mid-November and took the 10 most asked questions. Now there's going to be 3 of them in there that we're going to vaguely answer, because what we want to do is bring in some of our habitat partners and folks that plant switchgrass for a living and let them really get into the details of these 3 particular questions, and I'll let you know what those 3 questions are. But what I want to do right now is, for the folks that are new to the channel, new to the podcast, new to planting switchgrass, maybe you've done switchgrass, had some failures, or you've got questions on trying to improve a stand, change your situation a little bit. Hopefully these questions can help you folks out there, and if you've got questions, by all means, you can ask them here on the YouTube channel. You can ask them in the comments below. On the podcast, you can get a hold of us, northwoodswhitetails.com, the little icon in the lower right-hand corner. So let's talk about switchgrass, and these are the 10 most frequently asked questions, although they're not all the questions that we get. We're going to try to cover those in the next 2 months. But anyway, okay, the first 2 questions are, I think, based off of bad information on social media, old information on social media. And the number one question we're getting right now, what's the hard seed percentage of your switchgrass? Okay. And I tell folks this, there's no such thing as hard seed when it comes to switchgrass. At least ours here, there's no such thing as hard seed. Okay, there's 3 things you're looking at when you're looking at a switchgrass seed here. You're looking at the germ rate, the total germ rate, and the dormant seed. Okay, the total germ rate is the combination of the germ rate percentage and the dormant seed percentage. So the germ rate percentage is going to be what seed germinated in a lab germination test the first 14 days. Okay, and right now I'm just basing it off of looking at one of our big rock tags, 70%. So 70% of that seed germinated in the first 14 days in a lab germination test. Now, what people mistake hard seed, it's actually dormant seed. There's no such thing as hard seed. It's dormant seed. So the dormant seed is 26%. And that germinated day 15, 18, 20, 25, 30, you know, on down the line. And most of it with this Big Rock, Tecumseh, you know, Chippewa, now the Sundance, most of that is going to go the first year. It's very good seeding vigor, nice big plump seeds, a lot bigger than what we're seeing with some of these competitors' switchgrass. And so there really isn't a hard seed. Okay, so you get the germ rate is 70%, dormant seeding rate 26%, for a total germination rate of 96%. Dormant seed, there's no such thing as hard seed. All right, and another one based off of old information, years ago, do I have to stratify the seed? No, you do not. Okay, because our germ rate is so high, 70% and 26%, and most of it, again, like I said, is going to go the first year. You do not have to stratify the seed. Now, it might have been 2 years ago, I think, that I saw this, or last year. I can't remember. I saw a seed take from a pretty prominent seed company selling switchgrass, and their dormant seed rate was 70 to 72%. First off, I would never let that in the door here at Northwoods. Second of all, something like that, you might have to actually stratify that seed because the dormant seeding rate is so high. Stratifying might actually help that. But we don't do that here. You know, when we were selling Cave and Rock, we actually got it figured out down to where we wanted to buy, Excuse me, there's that nasty cough from pneumonia. But anyway, we figured out where we wanted to buy it down to the region of the country, what suppliers we liked, what suppliers we don't want to work with anymore, because they had such a high dormant seed rate. And we were telling folks, you don't need to worry about that. We were selling seed. We had one batch of Cave and Rock that was 95% germination and maybe 2% dormant. So that's one of the things you're going to want to look at. But if you have a very high dormant seed on the seed tag that you're buying or looking at, then you might have to stratify the seed. But anything we sell you here at Northwoods Whitetails, as far as switchgrass goes, no, you do not have to stratify your seed. Number 3, and this one's a real frustrating one, to the point where I actually get pissed. And I was just asked this the other day. Can I spray Roundup on my switchgrass seed if I frost seed it? Absolutely not. If you're using products here from Northwoods, we discourage it. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, you do not want to spray your way out of a problem. You want to take care of that situation. You want to get all your spraying done before the seed hits the ground. And I've seen this on multiple YouTube channels, not just one, where guys say, yeah, you can go ahead and spray around. No, you can't. Okay. Now, there may be people that out there that still do it. And you know what? Once the seed is in your hand, that's entirely up to you. But here at Northwoods, we strongly discourage it. And that's not just my opinion. The partners that we have, the producers who actually grow switchgrass for a living, they breed switchgrass for a living, say don't do this, okay? And this is what I recommend to people, where they're getting their information from. Who would you rather listen to? The folks that breed and grow switchgrass for a living that are saying do not spray Roundup on your switchgrass, or people that are on YouTube and social media talking about switchgrass for a living and making YouTube money, okay? I'm sorry, I'm being blunt, but that's just the truth. Listen to the folks that grow this for a living. Listen to the folks that breed switchgrass for a living. And they're telling you do not spray anything on your switchgrass once it's on the ground. We had a partner in Michigan, I think it was last year. It was a 2 or 3-year-old stand. It was greening up already, and the corn in their area wasn't even in the ground. And that's another bad piece of information. You can spray Roundup on your switchgrass if the corn in your area isn't up yet. Well, what happens if the corn's not even planted yet? How is that corn supposed to be up? That's a terrible metric. We had a gentleman that followed that metric and killed the switchgrass. And then he's mad at me for selling bad seed. No, you should be mad at the people that are selling you bad advice, because they're getting paid by YouTube or these podcast hosting companies for that bad advice. Be very careful, especially with this, where you're getting your information from. Listen to the folks that grow this for a living and breed the seed for a living, not the people that talk about it for a living. I cannot emphasize that enough. All right, in these next 3 questions, we're going to talk about kind of in a general, I can't even talk this morning, in general. And we're actually going to bring in some people that plant switchgrass for a living and do whitetail plants for a living that involve switchgrass, and we're going to let them really give you their opinions. But I'll just kind of give you the opinion I give folks when we're asked these questions. What's the best seeding rate? And I tell folks there's 4 different metrics that we need to look at. Okay, are you broadcasting it by hand, like an earthway bag seeder, or are you drilling it? Is it a bedding area or is it screening? Now, the screening rate, I think, should be a little bit higher than the bedding rate, because we don't want deer bedding in the screen. We want it a rate high enough to where it's uncomfortable for them to move through or try to bed in, but we don't want it so high that it chokes itself out. It's kind of like the same concept with the HD screen. People were talking Egyptian wheat 8, 10, 15 years ago. You want it 15, 20 pounds an acre. Well, no, you want it 8 to 9 pounds an acre with our screen, because it still needs room to grow and get strong. Same thing with bedding. I want it thin enough to where the deer feel comfortable moving in it and laying in it. I don't want it so thick where it's uncomfortable for them and you've created a deer desert. And the same thing with drilling. If you're going to broadcast it at, let's say, 7 pounds an acre for a screen, I'm certainly not drilling it at 7 pounds an acre, because it's going to choke itself out. So there's a big metric there that you need to look at. Same thing with variety, soil conditions, weed control. There's a lot to it. And we've got some general recommendations on our northwoodswhitetails.com in the planning instructions on general planning recommendations. But I've seen bedding rates as low as 2 pounds an acre because it depends on how many pockets and food you're putting in those bedding areas. If you look at a 1 acre bedding area. So there's some general recommendations we can go with, but it's going to vary on how you're planting, what you're doing, and especially bedding areas, what you're trying to accomplish. Some people ask, I planted too thick. Deer aren't using it. How do I thin the switchgrass out? And what I tell folks is, again, back to this general, what are you trying to do? Okay, you planted, you drilled it at 8 pounds an acre or 7 pounds an acre, way too thick for bedding areas. And now some of the deer, they don't even want to go in there because it's uncomfortable. But just thinning the switchgrass is going to probably involve, and what I tell folks, mechanical and more than likely chemical. If you can get it early enough in the year, you can kind of mark out what you want to do. If it's a travel corridor or a food plot, or you want to put bedding pockets in, you can go in and spray Roundup while the switch is still short. You might have to mow the old switch, or it can be mechanical. You go in there and disc it or till it early in the spring, mow and then disc and till, and then just spray clethodim to kill any kind of grass that comes back, and now you've got forbs and broadleaves and stuff like that coming. That's the way to do it too. Is there a way to go in and do strips? Maybe with a disc you can, but I still think you're going to have switchgrass that tries to come back, and you might have to do chemicals with clethodim. So there's ways to do it, and we've got a couple of partners that have thin switchgrass, and we're going to talk to them about it, but there's ways to do it, but more than likely it's going to be chemical and mechanical. And this third one, again, site specific. How big should my bedding pockets be in switchgrass? And again, we'll just take a couple acre switchgrass. I think a lot of it's going to depend on what you're trying to do. If you've got switchgrass that butts up to a big big food plot, the does are going to take up the first, it's common knowledge, does take up the best bedding closest to the food. So those pockets might be bigger. I've seen bedding pockets as big as a house. I've seen bedding pockets as small as the hood of a truck, And it's all going to depend on what you're trying to do. If you've got a lot of does you have to put in there, you might have a bigger one the size of a house, or at least a room in a house. And then put your cuttings or shrubs or, conifers make, structure, miscanthus. I relate the switchgrass, a big switchgrass planting, to what I see up here a lot is cattail swamps. It's just solid cattails. And what we've done for buck bedding, because we go 200-300 yards off that, and we'll take a pallet, put it down, a couple pallets, wood chips, and it's the size of I'm sitting right here in it looks like a 16 by 20 office, and this is perfect size. So we'll make a mound to get it up off the ground, get them up in the air a little bit, and then we'll cover it with wood chips, cover it with soil, and then we'll put some conifers in there, maybe some willow cuttings, but then we make sure we kill anything on that mound that would resemble grass. Okay, we don't want that. We want something different. And I would do the same thing with switchgrass. I know some of our partners have done that. They've put mounds way off the food plots, smaller ones, just 1 to 2 feet high, put conifers around it, maybe some miscanthus structure, some cuttings, some shrubs, create a different environment, but that pocket is no bigger than the hood of a pickup truck, or maybe the size of a pickup truck. But the pockets closer to the food get bigger and bigger because you've got more and more deer in it. So again, we'll let those experts that do this for a living answer that question in detail, but that's kind of a general answer I give folks. It just depends on what you're trying to do, where it's located in relationship to the food. So those 3 questions, seeding rates, thinning switchgrass, and bedding pockets in the switchgrass size, those 3 we're going to come back. I've got them highlighted here, but we're going to talk to some experts that actually do this for a living and let them get into more detail. But we do get asked that a lot. What's the best width for a screen with switchgrass? Now, my first screen was planted in the spring of 2017. We went in 2016, we mowed the area out, sprayed multiple times, and we did a 10-foot wide screen. Cave and rock switchgrass. Turned out phenomenal. And I really liked that. It was really thick. I think we did 8-9 pounds an acre. And the first year, if I had deer on, I think the screen ran north and south, and my access was from the west, food was on the east. I could walk right up to this screen, and I know there could be deer 3 to 5 yards away from that screen, inside the screen, and they would not see me nor hear me if I had silent access. So I really like that 10 to 12 feet. You can go a little bit thinner, narrower than you would like HD screen. We recommend like 12, 15, 16 feet. But the thing with these screens is you want them at a seeding rate to where it's thick enough to where the deer do not want to bed in it. They feel very uncomfortable being in that screen. So I like 10 to 12 feet with switchgrass. If you can go up to 15, even better. Okay, the next two questions are going to kind of be relatable. The first question is, what is my first year expectation? What can I expect? And then the second question is, how tall will it get after 3 years? So we'll kind of tie those in together. First question, what are my first year expectations? And that's going to go back to prep. But another thing is how you plant it, when you plant it, and what is the weather conditions. So I just talked about my 2017 planting, the first time I ever tried switchgrass, and knocked it out of the park. I did spraying. I did mowing in 2016, July. Then July, August, and September, we sprayed, killed, 2,4-D, simazine, Roundup, and then Roundup and Roundup. So again, frost seeded it in March of 2017 when the snow was all gone. And I looked at it in June, and I was kind of disappointed. It was like 6 to 10 inches tall, pretty weed free. It did a really nice job. We had a little bit of mullein in there, milkweed, but I didn't worry about it. Just walked away from it. Came back in August and looked at it, and it was 5 feet tall. I think eventually it got to be 6 feet. I couldn't see over the top of it, and I'm like, holy cow, this is easy. I don't know what the fuss is. This is a piece of cake. So we started in 2017. We started prepping for a 2018 frost seeding. 80 yards away, same dirt, same ground, same seed type, cave and rock. And the following year, did the same thing. 2 foot tall, full of weeds. What happened? Well, that spring, it was cold, it was wet, and although I had a great weed kill in 2018, Mother Nature's undefeated, and if she wants to grow something, she's going to. Okay, and we had some weeds show up, some broadleafs, and I didn't want to spray 2,4-D. I don't like spraying first year switch with anything. I mean, you can do it, but you got to give it a fighting chance. But we had such a long, drawn-out spring, similar to 2024, that the switch finally got going once it warmed up, but some of those weeds started growing when we had all that rain. So, my expectations after seeing the first the 2017 results, my expectations were 5 foot tall and perfect. Well, that was tapered because of the growing conditions, So it's going to depend on, especially if you frost seed, it's going to depend on that spring and when that seed gets warm enough soil to come out of the ground. But this was cave and rock, so it's an older variety. Wasn't maybe not, if had we used big rock, it might have been different. But first year expectations, you got to make sure you take care of those weeds. And like I said before at the beginning of the video, you're not going to want to spray your way out of this if you don't have to, okay, especially with Roundup. So take care of it. We'll talk about the second question, and then I'm going to talk about the 3 methods of planting we really recommend. How tall will this get after 3 years? Now, I'm on year 2 on some big rock plantings, and I've seen 8 feet, but it was really good ground, well taken care of, good weed prep. Tecumseh, second year planting, I saw 7 feet, even in a drought. And I'm very curious to see what year 3 is going to be. And I've seen folks already now, year number 3 with their big rock, 9 feet. I had the pleasure of having breakfast 2 days ago with Don, the farmer out of Ontario who grows this. We had long conversations about, expectations and stuff. They got some really cool stuff coming. I think you're going to see 10-foot tall switchgrass with some of these uh, new versions of Big Rock that are coming. I think you're going to be able to see 10-foot tall switchgrass, but you have to do your due diligence at planting. You have to get weed taken care of. You got to get your soil correct. You can't be planting the wrong variety and hoping for the best. So, expectations with the varieties we have, I would, Tecumseh, I would think after 3 years you should be able to have 7, maybe 8 feet. The Sundance sounds like it's going to be a little bit taller. Chippewa a little bit taller than that, and RC Big Rock's going to be the tallest variety. I've seen Cave and Rock get 9 feet that we were planting years ago. So, but it all is going to boil down to getting it out of the ground correctly the first year. It's kind of like a deer. If you get a runt that was born late, you might struggle the first 3 years. Same thing with switchgrass. If you're struggling and you're battling weeds the first year or two, it's going to set it back a little bit. And I tell folks, I would rather you plant it in June and get 1 or 2 more sprayings in before you plant than trying to rush it in May and then think you're going to more spray your way out of a problem. Do your weed control the best you can, and you're going to pay yourself off years down the road. And so, in our directions, we've got a couple of methods we like, but I'll tell you right now, dealing with this new variety, my favorite, second favorite, and third favorite. My favorite way of doing this, and what I've seen with our partners and just talking to them, the partner installers, and I've not got to drill mine yet, but we're going to try drilling some this year. Absolutely our favorite method of doing this, especially in the sandy grounds, Tecumseh and Sundance and these sandy grounds, central Wisconsin, northern Michigan, some of the upper Michigan regions, western Minnesota, Kansas. If you're in sandy ground, dry conditions, you're really going to do yourself a favor if you can drill this. And what I tell folks is the reason I like to drill this is a couple of reasons. One, you get to seed in the moisture zone. Although you're only going an 1/8 inch deep, maybe 1/4 inch deep. But the other thing is it gives you a chance to get that last spraying in. You can back your seeding up a little bit to early, and I'm just going to use here in upper Michigan when we plant, northern Michigan. You can back that seeding up a little bit and get that last spraying in, of Roundup if you have to, because the soil's warm and hopefully we're catching some rain. And those pesky grasses that you really don't want to be fighting while trying to grow a grass, you can get those to germinate and kill. One of our partners drilled some switchgrass last year, and he had germination in 8 days. 8 days, but it was in June, great growing conditions, plenty of rain, warm soil. 8 days he had switchgrass germinating. So I really like drilling it. If you can't drill it, you can't rent it, you can't, you don't own a drill. And most of people watching this don't own a drill, and that's fine. You can do that June planting. And again, I'm just referencing here. If you're down south, you can probably move this to May because you can start spraying earlier. People say, when do I plant? Well, you plant when you're done spraying. That's when you plant. There's not a hard date, but you start spraying it green up and get your spraying done. And when you think you've got all your spraying done, then you could plant. You can, if you have to do tillage, get your tillage done first, and then you start your spraying afterwards. You don't do all your spraying, do tillage, and then plant the seed, because now all that work you've done with spraying, you've just set yourself back. You brought all those weed seeds to the top. If you think you need to do tillage, do that first, even if you can do it in the fall. There's a lot of people that are going to plant switchgrass. They don't have frozen ground right now. Go do your tillage now, and then start spraying in the spring. But you can do that last spraying, weed control spraying of Roundup. And then what I like to do is, if I'm going to broadcast and roll it in, I like to try to catch a rain, go out and put the seed down, roll it in, and try to catch another rain. Okay. And one of the things you need to think about is when you're rolling, I really like either ATV tires or a lawn roller. Because this seed is so small, some of these cultipackers have their grooves are like this big. You can't see me on the podcast, but they have 6 or 7 inch grooves. You're not getting a great seed bed with a cultipacker, some of these bigger ones, okay, think about how small switchgrass is. That is what a lawn roller is for. A lawn roller is 100% contact all the time. On these cultipackers, if you look at it, especially if you have solid ground and you're just trying to set seed in, you might not even be touching that seed with 80% of that cultipacker because it's riding up in the air. So when I tell folks is if you're doing the switchgrass, especially clovers, these little tiny seeds, grab yourself a lawn roller. Go rent one. It's 100% contact versus some of these cultipackers. And I mean, just go look at it. Go look at a cultipacker laying flat on the ground. There's air gaps everywhere. And that's what you're trying to use that to set these little tiny seeds. Just go get a lawn roller. They're designed for these little tiny seeds. That's all I own. I don't own a cultipacker anymore. I've gotten rid of all of them. Just have lawn rollers. And I really like that for these little tiny seeds. So that's the second method. Try to catch some rain, get all your spraying done, try to catch some rain, broadcast, roll it in, and then try to catch some more rains, and then watch it grow. Third method that I don't use anymore because, to me, it's not necessary anymore because of the germination rates are so good, is frost seeding. And the most, how do you word this? The most failures we've seen with switchgrass has been frost seeding. And this past winter was a perfect example. This past spring of 2024, because up here, and I can't comment on how it was in Southern Illinois or Tennessee or Kentucky or anything like that. I just know what it was up here, northern Wisconsin, Michigan, northern Michigan. It was cold and it was really wet. And I know we had to wait until July to plant our HD screen. And the soil temperatures never got over 50. And so that's not really conducive, not only to growing our big rock switchgrass or Tecumseh, any switchgrass, okay? But, you could have a perfect conditions next year. But we saw failures with that to where folks had to go back and replant because that switchgrass just never came. Maybe, I know like the HD screen, if you put it in the ground when it's too cold, too wet, the seed eventually just rots. Is that happening with switchgrass? I don't know. But I'm not saying frost seeding doesn't work. It does work. I've established some great stands of switchgrass with frost seeding. I'm just saying frost seeding was needed for years because of the high dormancy seeding percentages in a lot of these old varieties. Like I said before, we saw a seed tag from a pretty prevalent seed company selling switchgrass, and it was up over 70%, the dormant seed. Well, that's probably a great candidate for frost seeding, so you can get some of that stratification. But what we have on a shelf here, it's not needed. And I think if you can get a few more sprayings in before that seed hits the ground in May, and again, I'm just referencing the planting dates up here. If you can get a few more sprayings in May and June, and then seed early June, I think you've got a much better chance. So I don't do frost seeding anymore, me personally. I'll recommend it if that's somebody's only option. But I think what we've seen in the last 3 years, the best switchgrass stands we've seen has been, again, I'm just referencing up here for timing of planting, is June and planting, whether it's drilled or broadcast and rolled in. That's what we've seen the best results. So just something to think about. And again, I'm not saying you can't frost seed switchgrass. You absolutely can frost seed switchgrass. But of the three methods, drilling is our favorite. And if you don't have a drill, you can't get a drill, and that's fine, I get it. We're still going to plant this method ourselves. Broadcast and roll it in on prepped ground or frost seeding. All right, last question I want to cover. I've seen this on social media. We get asked the same thing. Can I plant my switchgrass in shady ground? Well, you can plant your switchgrass anywhere. Ultimately, once that seed is in your hand, that's up to you what you do with it. We're just trying to give you a roadmap of how to get to where you want to be. And we have some switchgrass planted back here in shade. And it's not really an argument. There's been discussions, yes, it will, no, it won't. You got to understand something, folks. Switchgrass is a native prairie grass. Not a lot of shade on these native prairies, okay? And if you've watched us in the past, the folks that are watching on YouTube right now, you've watched our videos in the past. Our research plot in our backyard, you'll know that there is a stretch on the that would be the southwest corner, we have a 30 to 40 yard stretch of hybrid popple that are now 50 to 60 feet tall, right on the property line. And we have, just inside the property line, we have a 6 foot wide run of RC Big Rock that we planted 2 years ago. Turned out really nice. But we did include that run of RC Big Rock right next to the hybrid popple. So once those hybrid popple that run north and south, and so does the RC Big Rock. The RC Big Rock is just east of that hybrid popple. So the RC Big Rock gets sun from sun up until about noon. And then the afternoon sun is shaded out once those hybrid popple have leaf out. And they're one of the first to leaf out. So probably by early to mid-May, there's not a lot of sun getting to that RC Big Rock. So it gets half a day of sun. That RC Big Rock that gets full sun is anywhere from 5, I've seen 8 feet on some of this stuff. But let's just say average, it's 6 or 7 feet. Okay. The RC Big Rock that is planted next to that popple, 3 feet at best. Most of it's 2 feet. But the other thing is this. Some of that RC Big Rock, and for the folks watching on YouTube can see this, is as big around as his pen, where it gets full sun. But the RC Big Rock, and I'm not knocking RC Big Rock, it could be any switchgrass variety, because our HD screen is the same thing. It's short, it's spindly. You know, the switchgrass by that screen, the popples that doesn't get only gets half a day of sun is as big around as a cocktail straw, 2 to 3 feet tall. And then when it goes dormant, first snowstorm knocked it over. It was flat on the ground. Okay, so moral of the story is this. Will it grow in shade? Sure, it'll grow in shade. It's growing. But the thing is, it's only 2 feet, maybe 3 feet tall. And if you're planting switchgrass for a screen or for bedding area, is that what you're looking for? 2 to 3 feet tall? Now, this is only 2 years old, so I'm interested to see what it looks like in 4 to 5 years old. Okay, it might be 4 feet tall. It might be a little bit thicker. But it's a night and day difference. The exact same day, the exact same planting method, same everything. The switchgrass that gets full sun as it's designed to versus the switchgrass that only gets half a day of sun. It's not even half the height, and the strength is not there, and it's very thin. So, you know, I guess you're going to have to define success. It will grow, yes. It's going to get maybe half of its potential, and the standability is all but gone when you get weather. So, you know, that's what I tell folks. And the reason I have that planting back there is so I can take pictures and say, this is what it looks like with half a day of sun. You know, if you can only get a quarter of a day of sun to it, it might only get 2 feet tall and very spindly. So I guess to answer that, yes, it will grow in shade, but it's not going to reach its full potential. You know, and so if you're trying to create a screen, it might not get tall enough, and it might disappoint you the first time it goes dormant and we get hard weather. Heavy rain, snow. So hopefully, folks, if you've got questions, we helped you here. Maybe this spurred some thought. For the folks watching on YouTube, you have questions, by all means, ask them in the comments below. Maybe when we bring some of these experts in, these might be some questions for them. If you want to get a hold of us, you're on the podcast, you want to get a hold of us even on YouTube. If you go to northwoodswhitetails.com, we've got an icon in the lower right that actually becomes, you can type into that, it comes to us either as an email or a text message, and we try to answer them every day. I know, like I said, we were out with pneumonia for, I don't know, a week and a half. Not a very fun Christmas. New Year's wasn't much better. But we're just getting over it. We're really backed up with messages and trying to respond to everybody right now, so hopefully we caught everybody in time. If we haven't, again, reach out to us. We're just trying to get it caught up now. Got a lot of cool stuff coming. All our switchgrass is here. We're looking at a couple other varieties as well to bring in, but we've got switchgrass here. We're shipping daily, really ramping up. So we got a lot of cool stuff coming, some really big announcements coming. So again, if you've got questions, by all means, reach out to us. So hopefully this helped, folks. You learned something. If you've got questions and maybe we can learn something, love to hear about it. Thank you so much for listening to the Field of Greens podcast. Thank you to everybody on YouTube watching. Our channel's really growing quickly. Thank you so much for that, and we will talk to everybody in about a week.